Hi again then guys, and welcome to another look back to the world of GT6 to feature once again another of the cars which I believe have a good chance of coming back in the future of Gran Turismo before too long. Not necessarily in GT Sport, but it is possible for sure. Many of these vehicles are already super premiums, as they like to call them, stuff like the Alfa 8C, the Honda HSV10, and a number of others as well that we've already looked at, and this is another prime example of a massively popular fan favourite car, which so many people have consistently said they want to see back, and to be honest with you, I'm actually surprised that they haven't already brought this one back, and I believe, and I think I've actually said this in Beards and Cars, that I believe this would make a perfect twin return for another car as well that's going to be featured in this same series, and that is the Dodge Viper ACR. I think it would have been perfect to bring them with Laguna Seca. That would have been a really cool little update, but that didn't happen, so there's no point in thinking about that too much. This car in question though is of course the 6th generation Corvette, as the C6 name implies, and in particular, of course, the mighty ZR1. Now the ZR1, funnily enough, on paper at least, appears maybe at something of a disadvantage compared to the Z06. And of course the Z06 is, you could say, the ultimate mainstream Corvette, before you factor in the really specialised stuff like the ZL1s and the ZR1s from Chevy's lineup of Corvettes and Camaros. But the interesting thing is, even though the ZR1 has the smaller V8 engine, a 6.2 litre V8 instead of the larger 7 litre that the Z06 has, it still puts out way more power. Now of course it is supercharged, it's got that distinctive 640 horsepower output, which is definitely supercar level in terms of sheer power, over 600 pound-feet of torque as well, which is very impressive, 604 pound-feet, and that's one of the many ways in which an American sports car and a super sports car, and even some supercars, do often outdo many of the, for instance, Italian exotics from Ferrari and Lambo. They tend to be higher revving, less torquey, whereas America, you're never exactly wanting for torque, at least under most circumstances. The car is actually not particularly heavy either. It weighs 1,508 kilos, which is really good. Actually, that's a couple of hundred kilos lighter than, for instance, a Mercedes SLR McLaren, despite the fact it also has more power than an SLR. So in effect, you've got a SuperSports body with the power of a Lamborghini LP640 and less weight than most supercars on the market, even from Lambo and Mercedes and sometimes even Ferrari, put together into a package which in real life is significantly more affordable than many of those. Now, to say it's affordable is of course relative. It's still a Corvette, and it is one of the most expensive Corvettes in the game, especially when you're talking street cars only. The C6 in its regular form, which unfortunately we don't have in Gran Turismo. I actually love the regular C6. That's a pretty affordable car in most games. Even the Z06 doesn't tend to be too expensive. You're looking at probably somewhere in the region of 60 to 90,000, so on par with like Nissan GTRs, that kind of stuff. And for that level, it's a brilliant car. It offers a huge amount to work with, it's a fantastic machine, and even if the Z06 were to come back, I would still be happy with that because I love that car. And to be honest with you, I actually like that one more than the ZR1 on a personal note. But if they were only going to bring one back, then of course this one would make more sense. Now, as far as that performance in real life, you're looking at about 3.4 seconds to 60, which in other words is on par with the Zonda Cinque, and the top speed is about 205 miles an hour, which is also on par with another supercar, the Porsche Carrera GT. Now in the game, as I said, it is more expensive. It's almost a full 100 grand more, in fact, if I recall correctly, than the Z06 at 184,000 credits, which is quite a lot on the one hand, but actually that's not bad at all for the performance that it has. For a Corvette it's expensive, but compared to an Italian or otherwise European exotic, that's not expensive at all. The main price difference which matters though is the difference between this and the Viper ACR, because that is a pretty hefty difference between the two. 80 grand separates the two cars. The Viper is 100 grand, which is fantastic value. This is 184,000, just under 185,000. So if you're talking value just between the Corvette and Viper rivalry, then I would actually recommend the Viper. However, that doesn't mean that the Corvette's a bad car. It's fantastic. Now in GT6 you can do a number of things to make it of course even better. The power is really high. I believe it may even be the most powerful Corvette in the game, one of the only Corvettes to go over 1,000 horses if I recall correctly, but I could be wrong. I believe you can also fit it with a flat floor, which is pretty rare, even for premium cars, and of course that increases the performance level, it increases the grip, the downforce, and makes it feel like a borderline race car, which is kind of what it feels like to begin with anyway. Now, as far as how it delivers its performance, and maybe for instance how it compares to a Grand Sport or a Z06, I would say that the biggest key difference between a ZR1 and the others is that it feels more exotic, and in that way I totally understand why some of its fans consider it to be a supercar. It does feel more bespoke, it does feel more special, and it does feel more exclusive. At the same time though, it doesn't lose sight of the fact that the Corvette has never been, and probably never will be, a pure straight line machine only. In fact, that's one of my favourite things about the Corvette of any generation. It's a fantastic all-rounder. Now, this one is arguably the ultimate Corvette of its time, and even though it's not my favourite, there is something special about the ZR1. It's a unicorn, in effect, of the Corvette lineup, and even though it's not super rare by Corvette standards, it kind of feels like it is, in a weird sort of way. But maybe that's just me. I think some of you would agree with that, though. In terms of performance, well, in GT6, it's one of the best street cars in the game. It really is that simple. It's up there with the GTR Black Editions and the Viper ACRs. It is that good. It's a fantastic car, and it's actually one of the best cars in the game in terms of how much power it has compared to how much performance that power gives you. It doesn't have 12, 13, 1400 horses. It is over 1,000, but it's not amongst the most powerful, and yet it can still run with the best of them. And as far as bringing this car back, well, I would say that the ZR1 would fit perfectly, actually, into the N-Class systems of GT Sport, and maybe even whatever class system the next game has as well. This, of course, would be an N600 car as standard, and it would be a fantastic one. Put simply, you could detune the power, easily get it into N500, maybe lower, but probably not quite N400, and of course the upward mobility should be at least N900 on this car, pretty comfortably. So yeah, overall I think it would fit really well into the construct of GT Sport and would be a hugely popular car. I could for sure see it showing up in Nations Cup style events. And so ultimately that's my thoughts on the ZR1. So tell me down below if you are a fan of the car. Chances are you probably like it, most people do. Tell me down below what you think of it, about your memories maybe from GT6, whether or not you think it could come back versus whether you think it will, and even if you hope it will. But that's it for this review. Of course, I will see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.